The House will be in order. Pursuant to the order of the House, January 9, 2023, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties. All time shall be equally allocated between the parties, and in no event shall debate continue beyond 1:50 p.m. Each member, other than the majority, minority leaders, and the minority whip, shall be limited to 5 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Joyce, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to address the House and ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 20 days from now, the Homer City Generating Station in Pennsylvania will power down its turbines and close its doors. Since opening in 1969, the plant has reliably utilized the coal that has been mined in Pennsylvania communities for generations. After years of continual operation, Homer City's closure will leave just 4 operational coal plants functioning in the Keystone State. The closing of this plant is not only a symbolic loss, but one that will have real-world consequences for energy production. What President Biden, liberals in Congress, and green energy supporters across the United States fail to realize is that technologies like wind turbines and solar panels lack the capacity to keep the lights on. These alternative methods of production simply cannot produce enough power to meet the needs of our families and of our businesses. Without the capacity to store enough energy to be used in peak hours, green technologies are unable to support our electric grid. Eliminating coal power will have disastrous consequences, including rolling blackouts for families across America. We've seen the warning signs. Look to Europe. Austria, Germany, and Italy announce that they are reopening coal plants and admit that the green technologies have failed to produce the energy that those countries need. Let's face it, Americans have always led on innovation. And now, countries around the world will rely on America to build the carbon capture systems that will make coal plants safer and more reliable. That will not be possible as long as the Biden administration continues to force the shuttering of these facilities here at home. We need to return to the energy resources that are underneath the feet of my constituents in Pennsylvania. We need to return to American energy dominance. It's time for the Biden administration to end its reckless attacks on our energy producers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania yields. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Nichols, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow, former President Donald Trump will be arraigned in federal court in Miami. He's been indicted on 37 different felony charges, including false statements and representations, scheme to conceal, concealing a document in a federal investigation, corruptly concealing a document or record, withholding a document or record, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and 31 counts of willful retention of national defense information. Mr. Speaker, I read the incredibly detailed and evidence-based indictment, and it's deeply troubling and disturbing, to say the least. These charges show a complete and total disregard for the national security of the United States. The former president's action compromised the lives and safety of U.S. military personnel around the world. No one is above the law, and anyone who undermines U.S. national security must be held to answer for their actions. Mr. Speaker, he had our nuclear secrets stashed away in boxes in his bathroom. Listen, I'm here on the floor today because pro-democracy Republicans in North Carolina's 13th District rejected extremism and sent me to Washington because I ran to protect our democracy and our rule of law. This is about our rule of law. Mr. Speaker, as the American people try to make sense of these indictments, I think we should listen to the comments from Republicans who served in the Trump administration and other leading Republicans. John Bolton, who served as National Security Advisor in the Trump administration, said, quote, "The indictment is devastating. Those who defended Trump before the charges were made public, or those who have not yet spoken, should be very carefully weigh how history will consider their statements." Mick Mulroy, a senior Pentagon official in the Trump administration, said, quote, "The classified documents described in the indictment are some of the most secret information we possess. This type of information should never be removed from a security facility, and once discovered, should have been immediately returned." Bill Barr, who served as Attorney General in the Trump administration, said, quote, "If even half of it is true, then he's toast. It's a very detailed indictment, and it's very, very damning. This idea of presenting Trump as a victim here, the victim of a witch hunt, is ridiculous. He's not a victim here. He was totally wrong that he had the right to have those documents. Those documents are among the most sensitive secrets the country has." Asa Hutchinson, former Bush administration official, Arkansas, said that Donald Trump's actions, from his willful disregard for the Constitution to his disrespect for the rule of law, should not define our nation or the Republican Party. And Mitt Romney, the junior senator from the state of Utah, said, quote, "Mr. Trump brought these charges upon himself by not only taking classified documents, but by refusing to simply return them when given numerous opportunities to do so. These allegations are serious and, if proven, would be consistent with his other actions, offensive to the national interest, such as withholding defensive weapons from Ukraine for political reasons and failing to defend the Capitol from violent attack and insurrection," quote unquote. Mr. Speaker, we are a nation of law. No one is above the law in the United States of America. No one is entitled to keep top secret national security documents. The documents in this case are among the most secret we have in this country, nuclear secrets. We need to know just how much the careless and cavalier storage of these documents has compromised our nation's national security. I came to Congress to get things done for the people in my district, and I've been glad to build relationships with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. We should work in a bipartisan way whenever we can. But if we are going to truly heal as a country, we need to hold people accountable. As a lawyer, I know I know allowing this process to play out in a court of law and ensuring a fair and impartial trial is critically important. However, this is already a sad and somber moment in our nation's history. Democracy should never be taken for granted. We must be vigilant and proactive to protect it. In closing, Mr. Speaker, history will remember those who defend this lawless behavior, and it will not be kind. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Stauber, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to praise the dedication to service and what it means to be a true public servant by recognizing my constituent services director and Service Academy coordinator, Margaret Kavanaugh. For nearly 3 decades, Margaret has served thousands of Minnesota's citizens, having worked for 3 different members of Congress from the great state of Minnesota. It is devoted staff like Margaret who work behind the scenes solving difficult issues for individuals back home that so many people receive the help they need from their federal government. Public servants like Margaret are seldom recognized for their persistent efforts, yet are crucial to the development of many federal programs such as VA, disability benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, passport issues, and all too often, the IRS and refunds. Dedicated caseworkers like Margaret are often a godsend to so many constituents who are often overwhelmed or far too often ignored by our massive bureaucracies right here in Washington. Margaret is up there with the best of them, mentoring other caseworkers in the state and region with advice, contacts, and problem-solving techniques. I want to thank you, Margaret, for all you do for the people of the great state of Minnesota. With people like you, our constituents get the best assistance that they deserve. Once again, thank you, Margaret. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until 2 p.m. today.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Reconcile us to you, O God. We stand before you in our imperfection, keenly aware of our shortcomings, asking you to bridge the gap between our realities and our intentions, our best efforts and your desires. In your perfect mercy, recreate us that as individuals, as a body, and as a nation, that we would find restoration in your righteous plan. Even as you then reconcile each of us to yourself, call us to be reconciled one to another. Acknowledging your divine regard for us, may we regard no one from a human point of view, but see in each person the reflection of your redeeming love for all of your creation. Entrust us this day with this message of reconciliation, and may we prove worthy of your trust in our response. So may the past have no claim on us, the things of old not hold us back, but may we find renewed purpose, assured of your blessing on the work you set before us. In your merciful name we pray. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Joyce.
I ask those in the gallery to stand and join us as we honor our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask the House consent to address the House 1 minute. Advise to extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Iranian regime continues to enrich weapons-grade uranium, oppress its people, and export missiles and terrorism. Yesterday, the regime threatened the West could not stop it from a nuclear arms program, fulfilling the chant of death to Israel, death to America. Iranian drones murder innocent Ukrainians every day. In a Wall Street Journal column last week, John Bolton, former National Security Advisor, wrote incredibly, quote, during Mr. Biden's term, his administration still seeks to resuscitate the Iran deal, end of quote. President Trump was correct, pulling the U.S. out of the Iran deal as Iran shamefully continues ICBM development to kill Americans. I am grateful to have joined a bipartisan group of 35 House colleagues in sending a letter to leaders of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, encouraging them to reimpose sanctions on Iran. In conclusion, God bless our troops who successfully protected America for 20 years as the global war on terrorism continues, moving from the Afghanistan safe haven to America with open Biden borders. Our sympathy for the family of beloved civic leader Lottie Gregg. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Iowa seek recognition? So ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize Teresa Szymanski of Solon, Iowa, for her incredible work with her nonprofit foundation, Something Beautiful. Teresa operates a floral design and art studio in her home in Johnson County, with a mission to restore hope and dignity to women and children who have fell victim to trafficking and sexual abuse. With the proceeds raised, Teresa funds scholarships for victims of abuse and supports global initiatives such as Operation Underground Railroad. Operation Underground Railroad works to save children around the globe from sexual exploitation. Teresa offers a space for healing and creativity for those who desperately need it, using the wonders of Iowa's landscape as a space for renewal and rebirth. Mother Teresa once said, "Be kind and merciful. Let no one ever come to you without coming away better and happier." Through her work, Teresa not only believes this statement to be true, but she also practices its teachings daily. I would like to commend Teresa on all her dedication and hard work in helping vulnerable members of our community, while donating her time and resources to help turn traumatic experiences into something beautiful. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Guam seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to celebrate a remarkable educator, Guam's 2023 Teacher of the Year, Ms. Stefan Concepcion. She has been educating young minds for more than a decade and currently teaches 4th grade at Talafofo Elementary School. Ms. Concepcion's commitment to her students and dedication to her craft have earned her the recognition and admiration of her colleagues and community. Her passion for teaching is evident in her students' success, and she is a shining example of what an excellent teacher should be. Congratulations to Ms. Concepcion for being named Teacher of the Year. Thank you for making a positive impact on our island's youth and education system. We look forward to more of your great work in the years to come. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The so-called Green New Deal has reared its ugly head again, thanks to the Biden administration and its allies in Congress. Their newest attempt to prop up this failed radical agenda involved the banning of gas cooking appliances that millions of American families rely on every day. Make no mistake, this harebrained scheme is about more government control over the lives of Americans, more control over what we do, and ultimately how we think. What's the next domino to fall? Mr. Speaker, if this were to happen, American families would be crushed by high electricity bills and costly appliances in the name of climate activism. House Republicans have introduced the Save Our Gas Stoves Act and the Gas Stove Protection and Freedom Act to combat this madness. We must push back against more government control in our lives. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Thank you. Today, I'd like to announce that I'm writing an appropriations rider to defund Jack Smith's special counsel, his office, and the investigation. This is a weaponized government attempt to take down the top political enemy and leading presidential candidate of the United States, Donald J. Trump. We cannot allow the government to be weaponized for political purposes. I'd also like to ask all of my colleagues to join me in this effort. We have to use the power of appropriations to stop the weaponization of government, especially in light that we know that there are others who are guilty of true crimes. Never forget that former Secretary of State and Senator Hillary Clinton had classified documents on Anthony Weiner's laptop, who was convicted of sexting a minor inappropriate pictures. This is not how classified documents should be handled. There should have been an investigation done into that. Don't forget Joe Biden's documents that are sitting in his garage next to his Corvette where the door opens and closes. America sees this for exactly what it is, and we will not allow it to stand. I yield back the remainder of my time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the Chair.
House will be in order. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass House Resolution 377 as amendment.
Clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 377, resolution calling for the immediate release of Evan Gershkovich, a United States citizen and journalist who was wrongfully detained by the government of the Russian Federation in March 2023.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous materials on this measure.
So ordered.
Thank you, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Evan Gershkovich is an American citizen and a respected Wall Street Journal reporter. He's the son of 2 Soviet-born Jewish exiles who fled Russia to avoid persecution, and he is a loving little brother. What he is not, Mr. Speaker, is a criminal. Yet on March 29th, he was arrested by the corrupt Putin regime and charged with espionage. No evidence has been presented to back up this accusation. Because there is no evidence, Evan is innocent. He was simply doing his job, reporting on the news in Russia. But we know that the war criminal Putin doesn't like that. He doesn't want his own people to know about the atrocities that he is committing in Ukraine. He doesn't want them to know about the corruption within his own government or how he has turned their country into an international pariah. Vladimir Putin knows that a free press is a pillar of democracy, that a strong fourth estate will hold officials accountable. So he arrested Evan with the intention of not only silencing him, but of scaring other journalists to remain silent too. I want to assure Evan's friends, his coworkers, and especially his family who I've met with, that we will continue our fight every day until we bring him home to you. As a father of 5 children, I cannot begin to imagine the pain and suffering Evan's family is feeling right now. I had the opportunity to meet Evan's mother, Ella, recently. And like any mother, she was very worried about her son and his situation. but she was also very determined to do anything she could to bring him home. She thanked me for the efforts of our committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and others on Capitol Hill who are doing everything we can to help their son. Just as unfortunate, our next resolution on Paul Whelan makes clear that Evan's family is not the only one suffering through this nightmare. We are also awaiting information from the State Department about the arrest of yet another American citizen in Russia over this last weekend. The Putin regime is increasingly brazen in using political detentions to seek leverage over the Biden administration. And it must be made clear that the use of American citizens as political pawns will not go unpunished. These Americans deserve to be home with their families instead of in Russian prisons. So today's bipartisan resolution condemns the Putin regime for their illegal imprisonment. It calls on the Biden administration to prioritize bringing home all American citizens who are wrongfully detained overseas. And today we send a strong message to Vladimir Putin that America, Republicans and Democrats alike, will not tolerate his corrupt regime holding U.S. citizens hostage under false pretenses. America, Mr. Speaker, stands with Evan and with every American who is wrongfully detained overseas. And we will not rest until all of them are brought home. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Texas Reserve. The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Support of this bipartisan resolution, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, I'm a strong supporter of HRES 377, calling for the immediate release of Evan Gershkovich, a United States citizen and a journalist who was wrongfully detained by the government of the Russian Federation on March of 2023. And I want to thank Chairman McCall for working with me to introduce it in a bipartisan fashion. We may disagree on many issues in this body, but it is essential that the safe return of American citizens wrongfully detained overseas is not one of them. And I appreciate the cooperation and the work together that me and Mr. McCall do on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Evan Gershkovich, a journalist working in one of the most difficult media environments in the world, has dedicated his life to truth. His reporting has shed light on Russia's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, the struggling Russian economy, and its horrific war against the people of Ukraine. With this detention, Russia has once again stooped to the lowest of lows, detaining an American journalist for the first time since the Cold War. He is detained on baseless charges to gain political leverage and further silence the brave members of the independent press who are undeterred by Russian threats. Evan, like Paul Whelan, like Brittany Griner, like Trevor Reed before him, continues to be denied his rights by Russian authorities, who are throwing up roadblock after roadblock to prevent our embassy from getting access to him while he remains in detention. The sham legal processes he is subjected to are conducted without evidence, without transparency, and without due process. So while the administration, with the unanimous support of this Congress, was able to secure the release of Trevor and Brittany, We must continue to do so. We must continue to do everything, and I mean everything in our power, to ensure that Evan and Paul are brought home safely to their families as well. So for as long as necessary, we must state unequivocally that we stand with Evan, that we stand with Paul, that we stand with their families suffering tremendous emotional and financial strain as a result of their detentions. And by passing this resolution, we can do just that. I support this measure and hope we can continue to work in a bipartisan fashion with the executive branch on this and other critical legislation to better support Americans like Evan and their families. And I encourage my colleagues, all of us, to join in supporting this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Speaker, I have no further speakers and reserve the right to close.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, there's no more sacred responsibility of government than to ensure the safety and well-being of the American people and ensure that their human rights are respected. Tragically, the authoritarian regime in the Kremlin has taken to the practice of using that commitment against us, taking our citizens hostage for political leverage. In last year's State Department Authorization Act, which passed in the annual NDAA, we included additional tools for the State Department to address hostage taking. These include quicker notifications to Congress, expanded whistleblower rewards programs, and greater resources for the State Department. So I look forward to these changes to be put in use. In Evan's case, we can take an important step by passing this resolution and condemning hostage diplomacy in the strongest possible terms. We must continue to express support for the efforts of the administration to secure Evan's return and demonstrate our commitment to Evan, to Paul, and all other Americans wrongfully detained overseas for as long as it takes. As I close, I want to again thank Chairman McCall for partnering with me on this important resolution, and I hope my colleagues will join us unanimously in supporting this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New York yields. Gentleman from Texas is recognized to close.
Thank you, Speaker. Let me also thank the ranking member, Mr. Meeks. What makes this committee so special, in my opinion, is that we know how important it is to speak with one voice, one country, not a divided nation. And when it comes to Mr. Putin and what he's doing to our Americans over there, we are united with one voice. Mr. Speaker, Evan's case marks the first time since the Cold War that a journalist has been wrongfully charged with espionage on Russian soil. It is clear that Putin and the corrupt Kremlin will do anything to silence those who seek to expose the truth. A man of integrity, Evan put the truth ahead of his own safety. He was dedicated to shining a light on the vast corruption and the war crimes of Russia. Make no mistake, Evan's work posed a threat to Mr. Putin and his cronies. So they did what they always do when threatened. They silenced their critics. It is absolutely unacceptable for Putin to hold Americans hostage as diplomatic pawns. And quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, it's happening way too often now. As I said before, America stands with Evan, and we will not rest until he is home. And with that, I yield back.
The question before the House is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Resolution 377 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass House Resolution 272.
The clerk will read the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 272, resolution calling on the government of the Russian Federation to immediately release United States citizen Paul Whelan.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield myself as much time as I may consume. On December 28, 2018, U.S. citizen and Marine Corps veteran Paul Whelan was wrongfully arrested in Moscow and charged with espionage. This is just one of the many examples where an American is used as a political pawn by the Kremlin, where they disguise hostility and human rights abuses as justice. Paul was held in pretrial detention for 19 months, and on June 15, 2020, he was sentenced to 16 years in a Russian labor camp. Paul was never provided with any real evidence of guilt. Defense witnesses were excluded. He was denied a fair trial, including the opportunity to defend himself properly or even communicate with his family. Last month, on May 16th, Paul reached his 1,600-day illegally being held hostage in the Russian Federation for a crime he did not commit. See, Mr. Speaker, Paul is innocent, yet he remains behind bars to this day. Since his illegal incarceration, Paul has not received adequate medical care, and he's been denied regular access to his attorney. He's been designated as, quote, wrongfully detained by the U.S. Department of State. U.S. Ambassador John Sullivan accurately described Paul's wrongful conviction as a, quote, mockery of justice. Make no mistake, there's no such thing as justice in a country that is controlled by despots. This resolution shows that we have not forgotten, and we will not forget Paul, and that we will keep advocating for his immediate release. The U.S. Congress will not sit by as Americans are held hostage by the war criminal in the Kremlin. We will not rest until Paul and every wrongfully detained American is home safely with their families. During consideration of the prior measure, we discussed Russia's wrongful detention of the Wall Street reporter Evan Gershkovich. Another politically motivated imprisonment, I must mention, is Vladimir Kara-Murza, a legal U.S. permanent resident twice poisoned by the Kremlin. He is a relentless advocate for democracy and human rights and was recently sentenced to 25 years in prison for his criticism of Russia's war in Ukraine. Sadly, this is what happens when you contradict the state-run media in a totalitarian state. His reward for pursuing the truth and standing up, exposing Putin's brutality and corruption, was imprisonment. The vengeance of the Kremlin knows no bounds. Putin must stop using Cold War tactics to target innocent Americans as diplomatic pawns. I call for the immediate release of all Americans wrongfully detained abroad. I strongly urge my colleagues to support this resolution so Paul and his family know that the United States Congress stands with them with one voice, Republican and Democrat, chairman and ranking member, and will do everything in our power to make sure that Paul is returned safely to his home and to his family. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of this resolution, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, I'm in strong support of HRES 272, calling on the government of the Russian Federation to immediately release United States citizen Paul Whelan. And I want to thank Representative Haley Stevens for her continued work and tireless advocacy for her constituent, Paul Whelan, and other Americans wrongfully detained overseas. As I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to speak on this measure, I regret just how familiar it feels. For the third time, we are considering this resolution on the floor of the House of Representatives calling for Paul's release and expressing solidarity with him and other Americans wrongfully detained abroad. Russian authorities wrongfully detained Paul Whelan, an American Marine veteran, more than 1,600 days ago on baseless charges for which no evidence was ever provided, and subjected him to a sham, secretive trial. For more than 4 years, Mr. Speaker, Paul has endured persecution, denials of his lawful rights, and the withholding of critical medical treatment while the Kremlin seeks to use him as a pawn for political gain. For more than 4 years, Mr. Speaker, Paul's family has had to suffer this injustice, demanding his release and pleading with us, the United States government, to do everything in our power to bring him home. Like Evan Gershkovich, whose resolution we are also and just considered earlier today, Paul's only crime is being an American. Tragically, only the Kremlin can release him from this detention and the suffering it has caused Paul and his family. But we in the United States Congress and the United States House of Representatives are not powerless to make a difference and support the administration's effort to bring Paul and others like him home. So this resolution today is one step that we can take to demand that the Russian government forego the horrific practice of using the lives and freedoms of American citizens as political bargaining chips. Demanding Paul's release and raising his and other cases at every available opportunity. Mr. Speaker, we must pass this resolution calling for the release of Paul Whelan for the third straight Congress and continue to advocate forcefully and unequivocally for his release. We must continue to call out Russia for its illegal and reprehensible hostage-taking and warn Americans about the dangers of traveling to Putin's lawless fiefdom. In last year's NDAA, we bolstered notification and transparency at the State Department pertaining to wrongfully detained and added crucial new whistleblower rewards provisions that would deter further hostage-taking and help bring imprisoned Americans home to their families where they belong. So, Mr. Speaker, of course, we must continue to do everything we can and bring Paul to his family here at home in the United States of America. I strongly support this measure, Mr. Speaker, and again thank Representative Stevens for introducing it. And I urge my colleagues to do the same, and I reserve the balance of my time.
General reserves, General from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as you may consume to the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, the Vice Chair of the Financial Services Committee, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Intelligence Committee, and a co-sponsor of the resolution.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the Speaker, and I, of course, thank so much the Chairman and the Ranking Member for their work in bringing these important resolutions to the floor, and I stand in strong support of them and calling for the release of Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan. I want to thank my great colleague, Haley Stevens, and our work together as co-chairs of the Hostage and Detainee Task Force here in this House. And I'm grateful for her relentless advocacy for Paul and his family. while we continue our work to get Americans out of these countries that are holding them only because they have a blue passport. I believe more has to be done to stop this trend that you can simply take, Mr. Speaker, and wrongfully hold an American with impunity. Listen to these statistics from the Foley Foundation's 2022 report. A 175% increase in the incidence of U.S. nationals being wrongfully detained compared to the previous decade. A 60% increase in the average duration of a U.S. national's captivity over the past 11 years. 75%, Mr. Speaker, of U.S. nationals currently wrongfully detained are held by who? Iran, China, Venezuela, Syria, Russia. From 2012 to 2022, an average of 34 Americans were wrongfully held by foreign governments each year. Now put that in contrast to the decade of 2001 to 2011, only 5. This is your point, Mr. Chairman. It's a 580% increase in the past 10 years of Americans being taken and held hostage, mostly by governments. It's shocking. The number of releases of Americans is not keeping up with new detentions. And while the Levinson Act and our current hostage response efforts are important pieces to ensuring better transparency for our detainee families who are at home suffering, I think that process has significantly improved in the recent years, and I thank the State Department for that. It is still clear that adversarial countries believe that they can take and hold an American with impunity. We must do more. And while we work on doing more, I will continue to come to this House floor and support resolutions like the ones we're voting on today. They're critically important to show the families and the wrongful detainees that the U.S. House stands with them and demands their release. And I call all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support Paul and Evan and their families with their votes today. I thank the chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I proudly yield 5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Michigan who has been fighting for his release, Representative Haley Stevens.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm so grateful to the exceptional leadership of the House Foreign Affairs Committee for shepherding this resolution to the floor, calling on the Russian Federation to immediately release Paul Whelan. Chairman McCall, Ranking Member Meeks, and our subcommittee leadership, Chairman Keane and Ranking Member Keating, thank you for your steady bipartisan urgency in the consideration of HRES 272. Paul Whelan has been wrongfully detained by the Kremlin since I was first elected to Congress in the winter of 2018. The first time I introduced this legislation demanding that Russia release my constituent, I was eager to ensure Paul and his family that his government was behind him. The second time, I was heartbroken that he was still waiting for justice. And now, during the third Congress of Paul's detention, I am furious. Throughout Paul's detention, the Russian government has repeatedly violated his rights, denied him proper medical care, and refused to provide any evidence to substantiate the charges against him. Paul was held in a pretrial detention for over 18 months in the notorious Lefortovo prison. Then his trial was held behind closed doors and his defense was prohibited from calling witnesses, a sham trial. Paul now serves a 16-year sentence of hard labor in a prison camp where he has been since August of 2020, facing unbelievably harsh conditions, injury, and illness. Here in the United States, we can't even fathom the conditions that he faces on a daily basis. Today, we have the opportunity as a Congress to denounce Paul's rightful imprisonment and to stand up to Vladimir Putin and his Kremlin cronies. We will continue to come together as a Congress to make it clear that American citizens will not be used as political pawns by Mr. Putin. Period. End of story. I have said before that Paul's detention was the canary in the coal mine for the lawlessness that we now see at a global scale from Mr. Putin. Since Paul's detention, Mr. Putin has seized Marine Trevor Reed, basketball star Brittany Griner, and most recently, Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, the first reporter to be unlawfully detained by Russia since the Cold War. Today, I'm also proud to recognize the citizens who have taken up the fight to return their loved ones hand in hand with the United States government. As co-chair of the Hostage Task Force, alongside Mr. French Hill, we are standing up to these attacks on Americans for simply being Americans. Thank you, Mr. Hill, for helping to fight for Paul. I have spoken several times on this House floor about my deep admiration for Paul's sister, Elizabeth Whelan, who has become a true partner to my office and the people of Michigan's 11th District. In late April of just this year, Elizabeth joined America's UN Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield in a session on the UN Security Council that was being chaired by Russia's foreign minister. In a stunning testimony, she called on him directly to release her brother. Looking him straight in the eye, Elizabeth stressed that she didn't even know what her brother looked like anymore. Coverage of this event made it all the way to Paul's prison in Russia, strengthening his resolve and reflecting the bravery of his sister. That is the incredible family that Paul comes from. The fortitude of the Whelan family should be an inspiration to all Americans. Every single day, I see them stand up for freedom, democracy, and justice. They are fearless, and they are the reason Paul will come home. This is deeply personal to me, and it should be to all Americans. Not a single day goes by that I do not think about Paul and his family. Their pain is unimaginable, and no family should endure what the Whelans have. It has been my mission to see Paul return to Michigan and be reunited with his family and his beloved dog, Flora, a golden retriever who has outlived her breed by many years and is now 15. She is waiting for her owner to come home. I want to thank my fellow members of Congress for their continued advocacy on behalf of Paul, as well as all the families of hostages and wrongful detainees who are facing the unthinkable every single day. Paul, if you are watching this, you know I am praying for you. I am rooting for you, and I will not stop fighting for you. Vladimir Putin, if you are watching this, know that the world's strongest democracy and the seat of the world's power is united against you today. The United States will...
Wait another minute.
Thank you. The United States will not stand by and watch as your lawless regime continues its reign of terror. Release Paul Whelan now. Release Evan Gershkovich. End your years of human rights abuses and your illegal war against Ukraine. Enough is enough. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Lady yields back. Thank you so much. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I have no more further speakers, and I reserve the right to close.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I proudly yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Michigan, Representative Debbie Dingell.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to my dear friend and to the chair. I want to thank the entire House Foreign Affairs Committee for knowing the importance of this. And I rise today in strong support of H. Resolution 272. With this resolution, we are reaffirming as a House, as an institution of the United States government, our unwavering commitment to bring Paul Whelan home. Paul has been wrongfully imprisoned in Russia for more than 4 years. He is a native Michigander. Haley and I now share him. He's now technically, well, he is my constituent, but he's got 2 women you don't want to tick off and are not going to stop until we bring him home. His parents are my constituents, and our entire Michigan delegation, we don't put a party in front of it, stands united in this effort. His imprisonment continues to be an affront to due process, international law, and human rights. We have witnessed increasingly bold and reckless action by Russia and wrongfully detaining American citizens. This is unjust, it is unconscionable, and unacceptable. Our people are not political pawns. We must pursue every avenue to secure his immediate release, and I will work with everyone here and throughout our government to make that happen. Paul needs hope. I hope he sees all of us today. His family desperately needs hope. This House of Representatives needs to send a strong message to the Russians that Paul is not a pawn in international relations, and we all want him home. The House needs to tell Paul and his family today, they need to send a message. We aren't forgetting you. We are fighting hard and will never give up. I strongly urge all of my colleagues to support this important resolution. This is an opportunity for this body to once again demand, with one unified voice, the immediate release of Paul Whelan. It is far beyond time we bring him home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
General Lady yields. Gentleman from New York, have any further speakers?
No further speakers.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized to close.
I continue to reserve.
Gentleman from New York reserves.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purposes of closing. Mr. Speaker, for far too long, Paul Whelan has suffered at the hands of the regime and the Kremlin. For far too long, he has been forced to endure the horrific conditions in a Russian labor camp, wondering when he will finally be able to see his family again. For far too long, he has been left to wonder whether he has been forgotten by the government that the Kremlin is using him to extort. By passing this legislation and taking other important steps to support Paul, to support Evan, and other Americans wrongfully detained overseas, we can speak with one voice, a single voice, that the United States government will not rest until he and others like him are finally brought home to their families. One voice. That's what we'll do today. I know that my colleagues will join me in support of this very important resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Texas recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself the remainder of my time. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to first thank Ranking Member Meeks. We do speak with one voice as one nation against this hostage taking by foreign nation adversaries. And I'd like to thank Representative Stevens for her passion on this issue and for introducing this resolution and being a co-chair of that important caucus. And of course, my dear friend, Ms. Dingell, who represents the family and obviously the passion of the family. I can only imagine what it must feel like to have your son, family member, detained in one of the worst prisons in the world. You know, and this happens too often. We're seeing this trend way too often now. And it's not just Russia. It's China. And it's Iran. And it's Venezuela. It's a disturbing trend, Mr. Speaker, to take Americans hostage and hold them as political pawns for either a change of policy or an exchange of a prisoner that has no relation to the offense of the American. I mean, you can't tell me that what happened to Brittany Griner, whose offense was so meager, the idea she had some sort of small amount of, like whatever it was, a vape pipe, and then in exchange, a major Russian arms dealer. But that's what they do, and that's what they want. And we need to stop this, and we need to provide the deterrence to stop this. And the world continues to watch in horror as Vladimir Putin's crimes and atrocities in Ukraine continue. And that's a lot about what this is all about. I mean, Paul Whelan is a Marine. You know, Evan is a Wall Street Journal reporter. Just reporting the truth gets you thrown in prison in Russia. And what were they reporting about? The indiscriminate bombing and killing of civilians, to mass graves that I saw in Bucha, to torture chambers, to mobile crematoriums. Think about that, Mr. Speaker, mobile crematoriums. We haven't heard something like that in quite some time, probably since my father's generation and my father's war. What we were witnessing today is a genocide. And if you rise up in protest or report the truth, you will be put in prison. I condemn this aggression in the strongest possible terms, and I, along with the other members on both sides of the aisle, will continue to fight to hold these perpetrators accountable. But we must also condemn the Russian dictator's practice of exploiting them as political pawns. And as I've said, it's happened way too often. It's time to get Paul out of this Russian gulag, is what it is, and back to his family in Michigan. So today, all of us stand in this body with one voice, united as Americans, in condemning Russia's illegal detention of Paul Whelan. And Congress will not rest. As Congressman Stevens said, Mr. Putin, if you're watching this, and Paul, if you have the opportunity to watch this, we want you to know that we here in Congress will not rest until all Americans wrongfully detained in Russia are returned to their families. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Question for the House is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Resolution 272? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. For what purposes, gentlemen, rise?
I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present. Make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Speaker, I move the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3099 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3099, a bill to establish in the Department of State the position of Special Envoy for the Abraham Accords and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule of the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, will each recall 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
As ordered.
Thank you, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, for 75 years, the United States and Israel have been close friends and partners, working hand in hand on our shared priorities to keep our nation safe, secure, and prosperous. Along with our partnership with Israel, we've also have many shared interests with our Arab partners in the region. The United States has consistently worked to help secure peace in the Middle East, and we remain committed to enduring peace throughout the region. Not only do we want to ensure regional security, but economic prosperity as well, which drives cutting-edge innovation. And we are all concerned about Iran's malign activities. A nuclear Iran is a threat to the entire region and the world and is not acceptable. And yet, for so many years, our friends would not speak directly to one another. Even after Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994 established peace and diplomatic relations with Israel, other Arab countries refused. But then, in August 2020, everything changed. The UAE and Israel announced that they were normalizing diplomatic relations in a deal brokered by the Trump administration, which we now know as the Abraham Accords. In short order, Bahrain and Morocco joined UAE in opening diplomatic relations with Israel. I was proud to be at the White House for the signing of these famous documents, the Accords, a game-changing development that benefits the United States, Israel, and our partners in the region. The Abraham Accords have served as a foundation for increased cooperation between Israel and Middle Eastern nations. And we've already seen incredible leaps forward as these countries engage in defense cooperation, economic cooperation, and diplomatic engagement. What we have not seen, but we all wish to see, is more countries joining the Abraham Accords. Secretary of State Blinken was in Saudi Arabia last week, and I remain hopeful that one day, Saudi Arabia will engage with their neighbors and join these historic accords. Saudi Arabia and Israel would both benefit from working together on their shared interest. It's never been more important that we continue to prioritize the expansion of these agreements. Part of doing this entails making it clear who in the United States government is responsible for expanding these Abraham Accords. This bipartisan bill, introduced by my colleague and friend, Mike Lawler from New York and member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, will create that position, a special envoy for the Abraham Accords at the State Department. Special envoy will coordinate all efforts to expand the accords and strengthen relationships between Israel and participating countries. We need to put our diplomatic might into trying to achieve the kinds of big breakthroughs that created the accords almost 3 years ago. This legislation, Mr. Lawler's bill, does exactly that. So I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this important measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of this resolution and yield myself as much time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, let me thank fellow New Yorkers here. I want to thank my friend and colleague, Representative Torres, for working with Representative Lawler, for introducing this very important piece of legislation that would create a senior-level special envoy dedicated to enhancing and expanding the important Abraham Accords. Mr. Speaker, I've spoken in the past about my support for the Accords, which I believe have the potential to transform the security, diplomatic, and economic environment in the Middle East for peace and advance United States interests. These agreements are already showing promise and deserve the attention of this Congress. I also believe it is advantageous to the State Department to have an official in place focused on managing and implementing regional strategy for peace and encouraging cooperation between and among Israel, Arab states, and the Palestinians to enhance such prospects for a true peace and create tangible benefits for all. As Mr. McCall said, starting with the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, with the Abraham Accords, we need to grow and have more nations involved. Saying this time that we know that Israel has the right to exist and will exist, and we're going to look and work together for peace in the Middle East. That's why adding a special envoy dedicated to working and having and stimulating conversation among the other nations in the Gulf region with Israel is tremendously important, is something that I'm proud to support and hope my colleagues in the House joins us. I know that the Biden administration has taken implementation and expansion of the Abraham Accords seriously. And I know that the President has dedicated several government agencies to their success. So I believe that this high-level special envoy will be another asset to the State Department and help them coordinate and streamline implementation of the Accords. It is something that we should focus on because success means peace in the Middle East. And peace is good for all of us on this planet. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as you may consume to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Lawler, a member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs and the author of this important bill.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to speak in strong support of the passage of my bill, H.R. 3099, the Special Envoy for the Abraham Accords Act. I want to thank Chairman McCall, Ranking Member Meeks, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Torres, for working together in a bipartisan way to advance this legislation. I've been overwhelmed by the amount of support and positive feedback that this crucial piece of legislation has received, and for good reason. H.R. 3099 creates the position of Special Envoy for the Abraham Accords in the U.S. Department of State. This new position would hold ambassador rank and be Senate confirmed. The Special Envoy would be responsible for coordinating efforts across the United States government to expand and strengthen the Abraham Accords with key allies and strategic partners across the Middle East and across the globe. Having a point person at the State Department is key to ensuring the Accords maintain a priority in this administration and all future administrations. And while this bill seeks to hold the Biden administration accountable to ensure they are advancing the Abraham Accords, it does so with strong support from both sides of the aisle, making clear that the United States government prioritizes our relationship with Israel and the advancement of peace and prosperity, regardless of any other policy differences we may have. For 75 years, Israel has been and remains our staunchest ally and a pivotal partner in the Middle East, a beacon of freedom, democracy, and prosperity. They are an example that the rest of the region can look to for building a successful and vibrant society. The Abraham Accords, a series of normalization agreements between Israel and other Muslim-majority countries in the Middle East, were a monumental step that has provided a roadmap for the future of diplomacy in the Middle East and beyond. They also showcased that the real center of instability in the region is Iran. Many countries were finally ready to work together with the United States and Israel to counter Iran's state-sponsored terrorism, pursuit of nuclear weapons, and consistent violation of the human rights of the Iranian people. Mutual opposition to the Islamic Republic has fueled the Abraham Accords and signified a seismic shift in the geopolitical landscape. They are a testament to the transformative power of diplomacy and strong economic ties to bring about peace. At its origins in September 2020, the Abraham Accords included the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Morocco joined the following December after normalizing ties with Israel. While Israeli officials are taking meaningful steps to bring other countries to the Abraham Accords, none have joined since 2020, at the beginning of 21. It is critical, now more than ever, that we build upon this unprecedented progress, and the establishment of a special envoy is a definitive step in that direction. Having a special envoy entirely dedicated to the Abraham Accords would underscore the United States' commitment to nurturing the growth of these historic agreements, and it sends a clear message to our allies and indeed to the entire world about the immense value we place on normalized relations with Israel and increased cooperation and stability in the Middle East. This special envoy will also be critical for bringing Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords. Both countries have taken incremental steps to improve relations since Saudi Arabia's Gulf neighbors, the UAE and Bahrain, first normalized relations. Israeli Airlines, for instance, can now use Saudi Arabia's airspace, and the kingdom recently agreed to respect freedom of navigation in the Strait of Tiran for Israeli ships. As a leader in the Arab world, Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords would make serious inroads for Israel's relationships, not only in the Middle East, but across the globe. Additionally, strengthening ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia would create immense pushback against Iran. Moreover, this legislation calls for a comprehensive report to Congress detailing our nation's efforts to expand the Abraham Accords. It requests specific information on diplomatic engagements and the status of normalization efforts with various other countries. This report, in effect, ensures a system of checks and balances, holding the special envoy, the Biden administration, and all future administrations accountable for prioritizing the strengthening of these accords. Passing this bill will be a profound affirmation of our steadfast commitment to fostering peaceful, productive bilateral relationships in the Middle East, and we hope well beyond. It embodies our vision of a world where peace in the region is not just a distant dream, but a tangible reality within our reach. So today I stand before you urging all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me in championing this critical piece of legislation. Together, let's take this significant stride towards peace, prosperity, and a better future for all. And I think in closing, I want to say this legislation shows that when Congress wants to work together, we can. And we can advance legislation that not only makes a difference in the United States, but makes a difference around the world. And I want to thank my colleague, Richie Torres, for helping make that possible. Thank you. And
gentleman yields. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield with the right to close. I mean, I yield. I reserve my time.
You reserve. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to yield 3 minutes to my friend, the gentleman from the Bronx, New York.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Ranking Member Meeks, for your friendship and mentoring. And thank you, Chairman McCall and Ranking Member Meeks, for setting the gold standard of bipartisanship here in Congress. I want to thank the gentleman from New York, Mike Lawler, for his legislative partnership and leadership. If there is one cause that should transcend partisanship, it is the cause of peace in the Middle East. Building a bridge between Israel and the Arab world is neither a democratic value nor a Republican value, it's an American value. The Abraham Accords is both an affirmation of Arab-Israeli peace and a rejection of BDS as a relic of the past. Indeed, the 3 no's of the Khartoum resolution have been replaced by the 3 yeses of the Abraham Accords. Yes to recognition of Israel, yes to negotiations with Israel, and yes to peace with Israel. The Abraham Accords is an American achievement so monumental that it demands and deserves its own special envoy, whose sole and singular mission is to build on the inexorable progress of peace in the Middle East. Today, we in the United States Congress are bending the long arc of the Middle East exactly where it belongs, toward peace and prosperity for Jews, Christians, and Muslims, the children of Abraham finally standing together as one, divided no longer. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Reserve.
I have no further speakers. I reserve the right to close.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing.
Gentleman is recognized.
As we've heard here today, there is strong support in this Congress for the normalization of diplomatic relations between Israel and countries in the Arab and Muslim world. Diplomacy. Those are words that we need to use more often. And we need to get more engaged in diplomatic activity, working for peace, working for true recognition of Israel in the Middle East. Sustained agreement from the United States with a special envoy will help maintain the momentum that has built and lead to a more peaceful region. Imagine that. Nations talking and working together in a region where there had been full of war. People recognizing Israel's right to exist. Working in a diplomatic way across borders for better lives for everyone in the region. Peace in the region. Work to do, but it gives us hope that others will join and we will be able to assist with a special envoy, bringing people to the same table to support a more peaceful region. So I hope my colleagues will join me in support of this important resolution. Again, I want to thank Mr. McCall, Mr. Lawler, Mr. Torres for bringing this resolution to the floor of the House of Representatives so that all could hear that, again, we are united and working collectively together without party affiliation for the betterment of the world. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from New York yields. The gentleman from Texas is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank all the gentlemen from New York, Congressman Lawler, Ranking Member Meeks, and Richie Torres for bringing this legislation forward. You know, we all have talked about peace in the Middle East our entire lifetime, but we really have a chance to make a difference. And the Abraham Accords jump-started that process built upon the agreements with Egypt and then Jordan and now this. We're really, I think, privileged to be a part of a new era of ushering in cooperation between Israel and the Muslim majority countries. When I would talk to ambassadors from UAE and other countries, you know, they said, we're just tired. We're just tired of the Palestinians saying, no, we just can't do it. We just can't do it. And you know, they just said, you know, we want to move forward. We want progress. We want peace in the region, and they want economic prosperity, which this does. These accords marked a generational shift in Middle Eastern relations. This bill will further that effort and that mission, and we must continue the work. This special envoy will be dedicated to this purpose. The idea, I have to say, Richie Torres came up with this, worked with our side of the aisle, allowed, you know, Congressman Lawler working together to work on this legislation. You know, that's what Congress should look like. Working together on a goal that can promote peace, prosperity, and cooperation, in this case, the Middle East. May not see it in my lifetime, but I hope I do. But I do know that this bill will move it one step forward towards that great goal that we all share here today. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Thank you. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 3099? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. I'm sorry, let me go back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3099 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the...
Madam Speaker,
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
on that I request the yeas and the nays.
Thank you. The yeas and the nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass S 467.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 467, an act to modify the age requirement for the Student Incentive Payment Program of the State of Maritime Academics.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Bergman, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Kim, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong support of S 467, the Cadets Act. The Cadets Act was introduced earlier this year by a bipartisan group of senators led by Senator Peters of Michigan. It passed the Senate by unanimous consent last month. I am the proud sponsor of the companion legislation here in the House. The Cadets Act will begin to help solve a problem our nation faces in recruiting qualified mariners to serve in the Navy Reserve and crew our strategic sealift vessels. Our fleet of strategic sealift vessels are critical to our ability to project and sustain U.S. forces around the world and defend ourselves and our allies. But we can't do that without qualified Americans willing and able to crew these ships. S 467 will incentivize Americans to serve in this critical defense role by making those older than 25 years of age eligible for MARAD's Student Incentive Payment Program. The Student Incentive Payment Program provides financial assistance to cadets who attend one of the 6 state maritime academies and commit to a post-graduation service obligation in the Navy Reserve. I am proud to represent the Great Lakes Maritime Academy in Traverse City, Michigan, and I was honored to address their cadets at their graduation ceremony just a few weeks ago in May. Cadets at Great Lakes and other maritime academies can receive up to $32,000 in incentive payments over 4 years to help offset the cost of tuition and other education expenses. However, current law prohibits candidates older than 25 years of age from participating in the program. This is despite the fact that Americans between the age of 18 and 42 can currently join the Navy Reserve, and the state maritime academies are actively seeking to enroll veterans and service members, many of whom are older than age 25.
S467 amends the Student Incentive Payment Program to align its eligibility age with the age requirements for enlisting or commissioning the United States Navy Reserve. This is a good bipartisan bill that will help our veterans transition to well-paying jobs, support the great work done by our state maritime academies, and help fill critical national security vacancies. I urge all members to support the bill. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. I'd like to join my colleague, Mr. Bergman, and rise in support of the Cadets Act. This bipartisan bill raises the age requirement for the MARAD Student Incentive Payment Program, which provides financial support to cadets who attend one of 6 state maritime academies and commit to a post-graduation service obligation. Current age requirements for the Student Incentive Payment Program limit participation to people between 17 and 25 years old. This proposal would expand eligibility to people up to age 42. This bill would widen the pool of potential candidates and aligns the age requirements with that of the Navy Reserve. Many military veterans attend these state academies, and many applicants are too old to qualify for aid or the program. Graduates from the state maritime academies become licensed officers in the U.S. Merchant Marine and are part of the Navy's Strategic Sea Lift Officer Force. Currently, our Merchant Mariner Force is around 1,800 officers short of wartime needs. Because the average age of a Merchant Mariner is 47, we need to increase the number of eligible individuals for this program. This bill would open up additional opportunities to our best and brightest and bolster our national security. State maritime academies provide our veterans unique opportunities to transition to well-paying jobs and continue to serve in support of our nation. For those reasons, I urge members to support this bill.
Thank you. The gentleman from Michigan is now recognized.
I reserve.
Reserves. From New Jersey?
I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I urge all members to support this bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 467? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 662 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 662, a bill to amend the Disaster Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act 2023 to improve disaster relief funding for agricultural products and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Kamek, and the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Soto, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield to myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, this bill, led by my colleagues, Representatives Scott Franklin and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, both of the Sunshine State, and as well as the support of the entire Florida delegation, are very urgently calling on behalf of the citrus producers in our state to pass this bill. Hurricane Ian impacted more than 375,000 acres of citrus groves, costing nearly $675 million in damages to the industry. More than 90% of all Florida citrus production was impacted by tropical storms in 2022. I'll repeat that because I think it bears repeating. More than 90% of all Florida citrus production was impacted by tropical storms in 2022. In December of last year, Congress appropriated $3.7 billion with a B dollars to address agricultural losses from hurricanes and other natural disasters. However, to date, no citrus grower has received any of the agricultural disaster relief funds. None. When speaking to Secretary Vilsack, Secretary of the USDA, during a recent Ag Committee hearing, the Secretary stated that they, being USDA, needed this authority from Congress. And if we give USDA the authority, they will do everything that they can to get these funds to those who need it most. The exact quote from Secretary Vilsack was, "If you, Congress, direct us, USDA, and give us the power to do so, we will do everything we can to get the resources to the people who need it as quickly as we can." This bill would allow the Secretary of Agriculture to create a program within USDA to support specialty crops, including citrus damaged by natural disasters. In 2017, this relief model was successfully used to help growers recover from Hurricane Irma. The Block Grant Assistance Act would provide that exact same flexibility to the Secretary to help Florida citrus growers recover from Hurricane Ian. In 2018, Congress gave USDA the authority to issue block grants to states to assist with recovery efforts after Hurricane Irma. In conjunction with USDA Farm Service Agency, the FSA, the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and the Florida Division of Emergency Management, the Florida Citrus Recovery Block Grant Program was created to support citrus growers impacted by Hurricane Irma. The CRBG program was widely successful in aiding the Florida citrus industry. Unfortunately for our citrus producers, the language in the fiscal year 23 omnibus bill did not provide Secretary Vilsack the direct authority to disperse the appropriated disaster funds via block grant. Citrus is a crucial part of the Florida economy, with the industry of more than 400,000 acres of citrus groves across the state. The industry contributes $6.8 billion to the economy each year and supports over 33,000 jobs. Citrus growers have had no shortages of challenges over the past several decades, from citrus greening to natural disasters, high input costs, labor concerns, and beyond. But our state growers have continued to remain resilient. This bill would help our citrus growers recover from Hurricane Ian by allowing the Secretary to efficiently deploy the funds that have already been appropriated by Congress. And with that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise in strong support of H.R. 662, the Block Grant Assistance Act of 2023. I'm a proud co-sponsor of this bill, along with my fellow Floridians, including Ms. Kamick and Mr. Franklin and Ms. Wasserman Schultz. I want to thank Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member Scott for their assistance in moving this bill to the floor in a fairly expedited fashion. The bill authorizes the Department of Agriculture to utilize block grants to provide funding to states and territories to assist agricultural producers with losses due to natural disasters in the calendar year of 2022. This does not address future disaster assistance. It simply allows USDA to get the money already appropriated to producers in our home state sooner, although we should look at that going forward as a longer-term reform. Why is this important? Hurricane Ian devastated both southwest and central Florida. A Category 4 storm hitting on September 28th of last year. It was tied for the 5th strongest hurricane ever to make landfall in the United States. Less than 2 weeks later, on November 10th, 2022, Hurricane Nicole made landfall near Vero Beach, Florida. Nicole devastated parts of our East Coast, also an area of citrus. The devastation was horrific, and the impact on Florida citrus and other segments of our agriculture industry has been devastating. My colleagues from Florida and other impacted areas were grateful for Congress's support in the omnibus, but the losses to the citrus industry of somewhere between $416 to $675 million we need help quicker for these losses. The citrus industry is responsible for $6.8 billion in revenue and 33,000 jobs in Florida, including in Florida's 9th Congressional District. Our Florida Department of Citrus and Agriculture has utilized the block grant authority previously to help deliver assistance for cattle and timber producers, as well as citrus. Yet the money hasn't gotten there yet. I applaud our Agriculture Secretary, Vilsack, for making a promise. He came down to Polk County in Central Florida, met with citrus growers, and promised them he would get the money to these hard-fighting growers throughout Central and South Florida. He also came to the committee, as my colleague, Ms. Kamek, had mentioned already, making that same promise if we gave him the statutory authority to do that. Today on the House floor, we make good on our role in helping Secretary Vilsack's promise. Citrus faces a lot of challenges. Citrus greening continues to wreak havoc on our yields. We have new and promising pesticides that are working out, but we're a long way to go to getting back to the heydays of the mid-2000s. It's also America's vitamin C source. We can't afford to export this critical set of nutrients to foreign producers. We need to protect it right here at home. This Florida iconic crop is critical for now and in the future. And so I stand here today and ask my colleagues to support this critical bill and join me in voting yes on H.R. 662, and I yield back. I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserves. The gentlewoman from Florida is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now yield to the distinguished gentleman from the Sunshine State for as much time as he may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of my bill, H.R. 662, the Block Grant Assistance Act. This bill authorizes the Department of Agriculture to provide funding via block grants to states and territories to assist agricultural producers who suffered losses due to natural disasters that occurred in calendar year 2022. More than 90% of all Florida citrus production was wiped out by Hurricanes Ian and Nicole in 2022, totaling over 375,000 acres impacted. And it's not just a single season loss. The thousands of new trees that must be planted to replace those that were lost will not yield fruit for 3 to 5 years. The Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services expects these devastating losses to cost as much as $675 million. Congress did its part, passing supplemental disaster relief back in December, $3.7 billion to be exact. This money was set aside to assist recoveries from the consequences of droughts, wildfires, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, winter storms, and a host of other disasters that struck Americans throughout the country last year. However, previous disaster bills that assisted and addressed similar losses included explicit discretionary language and authority to the Secretary of Agriculture to deliver assistance via block grants. Unfortunately, the omnibus bill from last December did not include this needed authority language. Failure to provide this authority will result in longer delays in distributing relief to a citrus industry already devastated by invasive diseases and trade disadvantages. In fact, 8 months after the hurricanes, not a penny of emergency relief program funds have been dispersed to anyone, especially our citrus growers. They simply cannot continue to absorb blow after blow, especially when we can provide the needed assistance quickly. Without this authority, there is a real threat in Florida that our citrus groves will go under and vital agricultural land will be ceded to developers at fire sale prices. Madam Speaker, this bill does not appropriate any new funds. There's no additional expense to taxpayers. It simply gives the USDA the ability to quickly disperse already appropriated disaster relief funds via block grants. The Congressional Budget Office has reviewed it, and it will have zero impact on our federal budget. The money is there. We just need to get it to the folks who need it now before it's too late. In a recent Ag Appropriations Subcommittee hearing, Secretary Vilsack acknowledged the critical need for disaster relief and agreed that this is a viable solution. The USDA Inspector General also testified to us in an oversight hearing that historically, disaster block grants have been a highly effective tool in delivering much needed relief in a quick and efficient manner. I want to thank Representative Kamak, Representatives Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and Darren Soto, and the rest of my Florida colleagues who unanimously joined this effort. Senators Scott and Rubio have a Senate companion as well. Madam Speaker, this is not just a Florida concern. I'm honored to represent Florida's 18th Congressional District, which is home to more than 70% of Florida's citrus industry. So yes, this is near and dear to me. My constituents are suffering. They sent me here to Washington to be their voice and to fight for them. But this bill also helps secure relief for more than just those who earn their livings from citrus. In addition to other Florida ag producers who were devastated last year, this bill impacts agricultural communities all across the country who were affected by disasters in 2022. I extend my thanks to my colleagues in the Texas, California, and Washington delegations for their bipartisan co-sponsorship of this much-needed adjustment. I urge all of my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no additional speakers at the moment and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no additional speakers and am prepared to close. I reserve.
The reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no additional speakers and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time and urge adoption of this bill.
Thank you. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 662 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. For what purpose does the gentlewoman seek? The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Chair lays before the House a message.
To the Congress of the United States, Section 202D of the National Emergency Act, 50 U.S.C. 1622D, provides for the automatic termination of a national emergency unless, within 90 days prior to the anniversary date of its declaration, the President publishes in the Federal Register and transmits to the Congress a notice stating that the emergency is to continue in effect beyond the anniversary date. In accordance with this provision, I have sent to the Federal Register for publication the enclosed notice stating that the national emergency with respect to Belarus that was declared in Executive Order 13405 of June 16, 2006, which was expanded in scope in Executive Order 14038 of August 9, 2021, is to continue in effect beyond June 16, 2023. The actions and policies of certain members of the government of Belarus and other persons and the Belarusian regime's harmful activities and long-standing abuses continue to pose an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. Therefore, I have determined that it is necessary to continue the national emergency declared in Executive Order 13405 with respect to Belarus. Signed sincerely, Joseph R. Biden, Jr., The White House, June 12, 2023.
Referred to the Committee on Foreign Affairs and ordered printed. Chair lays before the House the communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to Section 114B of the John C. Stennis Center for Public Service Training and Development Act 2 U.S.C. 1103, I hereby reappoint the Honorable Terry A. Sewell of Alabama to the Board of Trustees for the John C. Stennis Center for Public Service Training and Development for the term of 6 years. Signed sincerely, Hakeem Jeffries, Democratic Leader.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6 p.m. today, or excuse me, 6:30 p.m. today.
The House will be in order. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess, subject to call of the Chair.
The House will be in order. Does the gentleman from Nevada seek recognition?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I have a motion. I now move that the House now adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House will stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning debate.